My name is Christina LaFaso. I'm a senior admissions advisor and the EOP coordinator at Stony Brook University. Stony Brook is part of the SUNY system. We're one of 64 different campuses in the state of New York. We're also one of the 4 university centers of the SUNY system. We're just a bit larger. We offer bachelor's, master's, and doctorate programs. We offer Division I sports, and we have around 18,000 undergraduate students, around 27,000 total enrollment. So we wanted to offer a financial aid event for you called Taking the Fear Out of FAFSA. It's not that scary, everybody. So we've got a wonderful host tonight. His name is Josh Streich. He is from our Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships, and he's going to tell you a lot about financial aid tonight and introduce the scary world of financial aid to you. I will be posting just a couple of links and emails in the chat throughout the presentation. It will reoccur, so you'll see it a couple times in the chat if you just want to grab those items and jot down those emails throughout the presentation for you. But all of your questions can be referred over to the Q&A. We've got a huge team of our financial aid staff answering questions in our Q&A for you. So please, at any point, if you have any questions that are not specific to you, that are more general, obviously they can't look up your financial aid, they can't look up your taxes and assist you throughout that right now in this type of environment. But if they are general questions, something you really are confused about or anything along those lines, please feel free to post them in Q&A right down there. All right, everybody, I'm handing it over.
Thank you so much, Christina. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll start the PowerPoint. So welcome everybody to our pre-Halloween weekend financial aid night that's going to focus a lot on not only the FAFSA, but financial aid in general. All of us that are helping answer questions along with Christina are from Stony Brook. So I'm going to try my best to offer some perspectives generally, and then offer some kind of Stony Brook specific things that could be translated to other schools as well. I do have some experience working at a mid-level private school as well, so I will offer some information and some general advice about the processes when it comes to SUNY schools versus private schools and all of that. So let's dive right in. So today we're going to talk about a few things. I'm going to go over the general nature of what financial aid is, where that financial aid comes from in terms of the different kind of sources that there are for financial aid. We're going to go over your cost of attendance. So what does it really mean to go to school and pay for school? We're going to talk about your expected family contribution, which is that number, if you've done the FAFSA already, that the FAFSA gives you at the end of it. A little bit deceptive in the language of what it says versus what it means, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to dive a little bit into the actual process of doing the FAFSA. We're going to show you some good screenshots from the website, and I'm going to offer some tips regarding that. We're going to go into state-based financial aid programs, which is going to specifically focus on New York State residents going to New York State schools. And we're going to end with a brief conversation about special circumstances for families who may have had changes in their financial makeup since the FAFSA was filed or since the tax year that was used was applicable for that. So let's dive on in. First things first, before you even think about doing anything, you want to pay attention to deadlines. Certain things are school specific, certain things are not. The FAFSA opens up for everybody on October 1st. So it's been open for a little while now. Don't feel like if you haven't done it yet, you're behind the 8 ball. You are still way, way ahead of the game if you want to take some time over the next few weeks to do it. Priority deadlines will vary school to school, but a lot of them fall between that February 1st and February 5th deadline. Priority deadlines are going to mean different things to different schools. So you'd want to reach out to your individual school to really figure out what a priority deadline means for certain kinds of aid. We're going to go into the different kinds of aid, and I'm going to specify what our priority deadline means for that kind of aid. There's certain aid that's not impacted by when you do the FAFSA, but there is certain school-specific aid that is. Our award letters have historically gone out late March. We're always trying to improve our process for getting awards to students, so we're hopeful that could be a little bit earlier, but that's when our historic award letters go out. What that award letter is going to entail is any sort of grants, scholarship, and any other financial aid that's going to be available, and it's also going to go over your cost of attendance. This information is pretty much across the board, universal, state, public, private schools. I will say that you may find that private schools tend to get award letters out to you a little bit quicker. And I will actually specify when we go over the kinds of financial aid that is almost identical, regardless if you go to a private school or if you go to a state school. The application process in itself is applying to your universities online. After you do that, that's when you're going to want to do the FAFSA. followed by your state aid application. And then after that, you want to wait until you get your award letter. A lot of times schools aren't going to ask for more documentation until you've committed to that school. So you may be required to submit additional documentation to whatever school you're going to, but the schools aren't going to ask for it until you decide where you're going. So what is financial aid? Financial aid consists of funds provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. It comes in three forms. There's gift aid, there's self-help aid, and there's federal work study. Gift aid comes from the federal Pell Grant and the SEOG grant. Now, I mentioned before that there are priority deadlines. I also want to stress that this is an overview slide. We're going to go into the specifics of a lot of these specific awards in further slides. So this is just to give you a brief overview of the kind of aid you can be expecting. So the Pell Grant and the SEOG grant, which is the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. There's state-based grants, and the website for at least New York state-based grants is hesc.ny.gov. And there's scholarships, merit-based or external private sources. There's self-help aid, which comes in the form of federal and private educational loans. Every student, by doing the FAFSA, is eligible for federal loans. They are considered financial aid from the general sense, and every student, regardless of your demographic makeup or your financial makeup or anything like that, you will get offered federal loans. So they're either direct Stafford loans or direct Parent Plus loans. Parent Plus loans we'll talk about a little bit further along. And finally, for doing the FAFSA, you could also be offered the ability to work on campus through a specific program called Federal Work Study. General overview. I'm going to dive into a little bit more of each one as we go along. This is more of a visual of how that kind of looks. You want to think about it in four quadrants. You have the loans and the work study employment, which is your own taking on some of the burden of the cost for your education. There's the gift aid, which is awarded via a combination of Pell Grants, SEOG grants, and then scholarships awarded through your school or through external agencies. So that's kind of a combination of both. And at least at Stony Brook, we find that students tend to use both. Students do usually take out their loans. It's sometimes a means to an end when it comes to funding education. So going into COA a little bit first, before we dive into more of the specific types of financial aid. Cost of attendance, in layman's terms, is what is it going to cost for me to go to school? There is the understanding that you're going to have a bill and that you're going to be assessed things like tuition fees and room and board. These are called direct costs. These are, as I like to say, what's on the bill. You'll get a bill whenever you enroll at your school, and the direct costs are going to be listed right on that bill, and they're also going to be listed on your award letter when you get it. However, there's also the understanding that it doesn't just cost tuition, room, board, and fees to go to school. There's other expenses that you're going to incur based on your specific type of student that you are. So you're going to have transportation expenses, especially if you're a commuter student. You're going to have books and supplies, and you're going to have miscellaneous personal expenses as well. These are called indirect costs because they are not billable charges. Almost all schools at this point do not charge you for books on the bill. They they encourage you to go out and buy books where it makes the most sense for you. These cannot be billed to students because they're going to vary student to student. So while you may pay a transportation fee at your university, which helps cover potentially busing on campus and other resources that you can use for that, there's a transportation component of your cost of attendance that is going to show on your award letter. So it's going to look like you have a potentially higher cost of attendance than you were expecting, but there's the assumption that certain students aren't going to be using a lot or even incurring those charges relating to a transportation budget because you may be on campus and you may not need those funds. So it's just important to remember that as a student, when you see your total cost of attendance, it's including the bill itself and then the non-billable charges as well. And whenever I meet with new families, I always try to focus really on the bill because the bill is obviously step one. It's important to think about the indirect costs, but meeting the bill is usually what everybody's focus is. And usually if you can meet the bill, the rest you can kind of figure out as you go along. So here's a screenshot of what it looks like to do the FAFSA. You go to fafsa.ed.gov. And you'd want to first create an FSA ID. So if you want to do that, you go to start here. And then from that, you would create an FSA ID that's associated with your account. You and your parents are each going to create one. And then as you go along doing the FAFSA, you're going to each fill out different parts depending on if it's the student portion or the parent portion. Both have to be signed. I'm going to go into in a little bit specific kinds of errors that you're going to get by doing the FAFSA potentially. That's just how the homepage looks. They've made it a lot easier over the last 4 or 5 years by adding the myStudentAid mobile app, which allows you to begin, complete, save, and submit the FAFSA. Couple of important things to remember while you're doing this process is that you can stop and pick it back up at another time. You'll get a save key when that happens. Don't lose that save key. And same thing with your FSA ID. I will say, and this is a good thing, the DOE, at least, or the Department of Education, really is very protective of your data. So there's a lot of hoops you usually have to go through to reactivate and get things. And that's a good thing because they want to make sure that you are who you say you are and that your information is protected, because you are being asked to disclose a very legitimate amount of personal information when you are doing this application. In terms of just other things, it is a little bit scary looking at it for the first time, but I always tell families that you can take an hour on a Saturday or a Sunday, have your documentation with you. And this year you'd be using your 2020 tax returns for this upcoming FAFSA year. So make sure you have that documentation. And then as long as you're focusing on it, you usually can do this in under an hour. Another thing I want to stress is it is a free application for federal student aid. So please do not pay anybody to help you do this FAFSA application. It is free. And any questions that you would have relating to some of the weird, tricky income questions or some other specific questions that you may think are very personal to you, there are numbers available that you can call, and you can always call a financial aid office that your student is interested in, and we can try to triage your question as best possible. But it really is not beneficial to have somebody do your FAFSA and pay them the way you'd pay a tax guy. So definitely don't recommend doing that. So I mentioned the expected family contribution before. This is the gateway number that's going to determine what aid bracket you're in to give you certain kinds of financial aid. It's the measurement of a student and family's ability to pay for post-secondary educational expenses. It consists of a combination of a student contribution and a parent contribution. In short terms, it takes the income and household and demographic information for you and for your parents, and then determines that based on that, you're put in a certain aid bracket. It's an index number. It's a little bit deceptive. We always have families and people call saying my EFCs, I can't pay that every year for school. It's not necessarily an indicative measurement of what your family can be expected to pay. Rather, it puts you in a certain need bracket that associates with a certain kind of grant or loan eligibility, depending on the school. So they're actually changing the language for EFC. I think I forgot exactly what it's going to be called, but I think this is the last FAFSA, or there's 1 or 2 more where they're going to keep that number and then they're going to change it to something better. How you see it, once you do your FAFSA, you get a student aid report, which is usually available on the home screen of the FAFSA page within, they say, up to 2 weeks. It's important to pay attention to this number because going back to what I said about how award letters tend to go out in mid to late March, if you know your expected family contribution, schools can start to give you a general idea of the types of aid you could be looking at. So if you did your FAFSA already and have an EFC of 312, we can give you a ballpark of at least your loan and your Pell Grant eligibility to start giving you some generalized ideas about the kind of aid you can be expecting that'll help you afford school. So as with any sort of complex federal document, there is room for a lot of errors. These are some common errors that we have seen. Issues with Social Security numbers. What we see is sometimes the students and parents will switch their Social Security numbers by accident. Sometimes there was a name change that was not reported to the Social Security Administration. So the name on the FAFSA is not matching the Social Security number. So these are kind of commonalities where, depending on the nature, you'd have to get it resolved either with the FAFSA directly, or you'd have to call Social Security or something like that. It's a little bit confusing when dealing with blended and dynamic family situations. So if your family was together in 2020, but then separated in 2021, it's important to pay attention to the questions that you're being asked, because a lot of the questions ask for the time that you're filing the FAFSA, but then you're also using 2020 tax information. So even though you were married, let's say in 2020, if you've since separated from your spouse in 2021, you would put that you're separated, but you would put that you did married filing joint. You would take out the spouse that's no longer in the household's income. Couple things to remember about those situations. If you are separated from your child's parent and you remarry somebody else, even though that new person is not the biological parent of the child, that person's income has to be reported on the FAFSA along with yours. So a remarriage would require that. That's kind of going into the third bullet point about income earned by parents and step parents. That needs to be accurate, and if things kind of look a little weird, you are subject to be requested documentation by the Department of Education, which is handled through the specific university that you would go to. Untaxed income is also another common mistake. Some people don't know where to put what. Some people just get a little confused by the process. So this is an example of where if you're confused about what to put somewhere, the FAFSA has gotten better at having prompts or little like question buttons that you can click next to each question. And it'll say, refer to this number, refer to on your tax return and all that. So it's gotten better, but if you do have questions, it's always good to at least call and ask. I also want to stress that if you make a mistake, you can always change it. You can always go online and make a correction, and then we will process the new FAFSA with the correction. Household size. When you are reporting people in your household, it's your parents. So it's the student, their parents, and anybody else in the household who the parents support at least 50% of the time. This does not matter if there's a situation where, I go back to the divorce situation where there's a couple of children, and even though they both live with one parent, maybe one parent claims them on their taxes, that doesn't really matter. So that would still be a situation where you put both children in the household and all that. So it's the child, their siblings, parents, and then whoever else parent supports at least 50% who lives in the household. That again bleeds into the number of college household members in college. It shouldn't be parents. It should only be the students, and that's it. So even if there's a parent who's going back to school, they should not be included in the household size. And real estate and investment net worth. This is a more common thing that we see when FAFSAs get selected for like a federal verification process, where families forget to include a rental property that they have or other assets that they have. If you are living in your home and you're renting out a portion of it, that is considered an asset. Your primary residence is not an asset if you are not renting it out, but if you are, it is considered an asset that has, and the value of that has to be reported on the FAFSA. So just keep that in mind. So now that you have a brief understanding about some of the weirdness that goes on with the FAFSA, let's talk about what happens when you do the FAFSA and the kind of aid you get. The Pell Grant is a universal grant that does not depend on when you do the FAFSA or kind of how you do the FAFSA, essentially. It is solely based on that expected family contribution number. So it's available to matriculated undergraduate students who have not earned a first bachelor's degree, and eligibility is determined by a federal formula called the expected family contribution formula. It's a long formula. It's pages and pages long. You must be a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen. So for this academic year, the range for Pell Grants ranges from $672 to $6,495. This does not change based on the kind of school that a student goes to. So Stony Brook happens to be a school with a tuition amount of only $7,070. So if you are a max eligible student, your tuition is almost covered by Pell alone. Students who did the FAFSA on October 1st would get the same Pell Grant as students who do the FAFSA in February if their expected family contribution is the same. It is not a first come, first serve award. Your eligibility is solely based on that expected family contribution number. In terms of expected increases, we've been seeing it goes up about $100 between the minimum and maximum. So $772 and $65.95. That's just historic. I don't know if that's subject to be different next year, but that is the best ballpark that I could at least give right now when it comes to that. The SEOG grant is different from the Pell Grant. So schools get from the federal government a certain allotment of this money, and then it's at the school's discretion how that money should be spent. So it's available to US citizen or non-citizens who are matriculated undergraduates who have not earned a first bachelor's degree and who demonstrate exceptional financial need. That's really the main threshold, is that the university has to show that the student has experienced significant financial need. Stony Brook specifically, and I'll talk about Stony Brook, we have a lot of high need students. So we get a certain amount of funding, and then instead of awarding large amounts to a few people, we go out with smaller amounts, generally between about $500 and $1,000 to more students. It's at the university's discretion what they want to do with that funding. And when you do get that expected family contribution and get an award letter or two early from a private school or something, this is a grant that could change school to school. So keep that in mind as you're getting those first award letters in and want to try to make some generalizations about what your rate's going to be at other schools. I think it's an okay tool, but this is why I stress really sectioning out what you can expect to be standard versus non-standard. So the SEOG grant is also, at least at Stony Brook, an award that is only given to students who do their FAFSA by the priority deadline. So that's another one of our requirements. So you have to have very high need. You have to do the FAFSA before February 15th to be considered for that. And you have to be eligible for a Pell Grant as well. So there's financial aid, so there's scholarships that are awarded. So there's different kinds of scholarships depending on the school and depending on the kind of student that you are. There's merit-based scholarships. So all incoming freshmen are considered for at least Stony Brook's freshman merit scholarships. And that's pretty true for most schools. The majority of our freshman merit-based scholarships require no special scholarship applications. We are not an institutional financial aid-based school. So what that means is that we award our scholarships as a non-need school. So we don't look at FAFSAs when scholarships are awarded. Your high school GPA, your high school merit is looked at, and that is what determines your scholarship amount. So it doesn't matter if your FAFSA shows that you're a high income individual or a low income individual or family, you're still going to be considered in the same kind of fashion. These kinds of scholarships can vary when it comes to different kinds of schools. Schools with a better ability to help supplement costs, usually higher tuition schools, may offer financial aid scholarships as well in the form of cleverly worded grants, X school competitive grant or something like that. Those tend to be financial based. So there could be an admissions component to it in terms of your merit from high school, but they also are taking into account your FAFSA. I want to stress that because of this, we are not a school that does the CSS profile when it comes to filling out your FAFSA. The CSS profile, that's really used for schools that have the ability to help supplement even further when it comes to grant funding. So we are not a school that does the CSS profile. All admitted students, first-time freshmen are academically qualified, are automatically reviewed for scholarship eligibility, and scholarships are offered on a funds available basis. It's hard for at least me at the Stony Brook level to say what we can expect in terms of the value of scholarships for next year, because even that can change somewhat. So as we get closer to spring, you should reach out to your schools and kind of start inquiring about that. It's always our goal to get our scholarships out as soon as possible. In general, it happens depending on the time when you're admitted. It could happen within a week or two when you're admitted, but sometimes depending on where we are in the process, that doesn't happen. So just keep that in mind with all your schools. Keep an open dialogue open with all of your schools. Once you are a student at Stony Brook, at least, there's undergraduate scholarship applications. And this comes in the form of university-based financial aid applications through schools that have that, and donor-based scholarships or named scholarships. So Stony Brook has a lot of those where you don't qualify for any additional scholarships if let's say you had 2 4.0 semesters your first year in school here. That doesn't outright qualify you for any sort of additional scholarships. It would put you in great competition for one of our application-based scholarships, but that would be now an application process instead of just being automatically considered for that. Our donor-specific scholarships, some of them actually do have a financial component to it. So sometimes we need to see if you have a FAFSA on file, or we need to see what that expected family contribution shows, or we need to see if you have any sort of unmet financial need based on your bill and all of that. And you could always go the external scholarship route as well. These are third-party organizations through like FastWeb or scholarships.com. Never, ever, ever give out your social to these. And if you have to pay for a scholarship application, it's probably a scam. My phone now says it's probably a scam when someone calls me that's a scam. So I'm telling you right now, it's probably a scam. So definitely don't pay for any of that stuff, because if you're paying, then there's usually not going to be much of a benefit. It's better for you to just pay that money towards your tuition at that point. So work study. Work study is another example of an award that is school specific in terms of who gets it and who's eligible for it. So it's funding provided to universities by the federal government. You need to have a FAFSA. So it's based on your FAFSA. There's usually flexible hours with working, and it's not used to cover the student's tuition bill. I want to spend a couple minutes on this because in my experience, both working at a private school and a federal school or a state school, it's challenging sometimes with award letters, because the award letters will sometimes have work study on the bill, and it's in there as a factor or as quote unquote a payment towards the bill. So it lowers a student's cost of attendance. Don't be deceived by that. Work study is not an automatic qualification for a job, nor does it pay towards the bill. So a student who gets granted work study has the ability to go apply for specific jobs that are work study eligible. And at Stony Brook specifically, that's a majority of our jobs. So if a student does get that benefit of being awarded that, they will see an offer of anywhere from $25,000 to $3,000, and it'll look like it's acting as if a scholarship is, where it's like, okay, it's $3,000 off the bill. It's not that. What it is it allows a student to earn $3,000 for the academic year in the form of a biweekly paycheck. So you can choose to take that paycheck every 2 weeks and pay it towards the bill, but you cannot opt to have that apply directly towards the bill. A couple other things to think about. This is a priority deadline requirement for Stony Brook, so it has to be done by the priority deadline. We are a very high needs school, so even a little bit before the priority deadline would still most likely be out of funding. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's important. You need to make sure that you answer yes to the work study question on the FAFSA, because if you answer I don't know or no, you automatically get defaulted to the no category and you won't be considered for work study, at least initially. So just make sure if you put no or don't know the first time, go back and change it. Just make sure you pay attention to that. So this is another example of a school, and we have seen this a lot, where the private schools will tend to offer work study to all who are eligible because they usually have less need eligible students. Stony Brook is not a school that does that. We have probably a significant amount of students who would get it normally, but because we have so many students who qualify for it, we just can't give it out that way. So loans, as a part of financial aid, you are going to be eligible for federal Stafford loans. So the amounts of the Stafford loans are going to depend on your grade in school. A lot of our freshmen come in with transfer credits or come in with high school credits that they got. So it's not necessarily your year in school, so how long on the calendar you've been in school, it's how many credits you've earned. So once you reach sophomore level, you earn 65 credits, $6,500 a year in Stafford loans. So sometimes we have students who come in and are already getting that. So there's subsidized and unsubsidized. Federal direct student loans are one form of student self-help financial aid. Through the federal direct student loan program, students borrow money for college from the federal government. The only difference between a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan is that a subsidized loan does not accrue interest while you are enrolled at least half time in a degree program. Think about it as the government subsidizing the interest. It always confused me, those two, but when I was told it that way, that kind of stuck and made sense to me. Unsubsidized loan accrues interest upon loan dispersal. What does that mean? When you borrow the loan, once it pays, it's going to start slowly, especially because they're low dollar amounts, accruing interest on that loan. Any unsubsidized loan interest that is accrued during the time you're in school will capitalize at the end of your enrollment and then be added to the base principal, and that's what you'd end up paying back. There's no ability to increase these amounts for freshmen, sophomore, and junior and seniors who are dependent students. If you do need more, it'll be in the form of a federal plus loan. Only other thing I want to stress is that the interest rate for the loan that you're applying for each year is a fixed rate, but the loan for a freshman year can be different in interest from the loan for your sophomore year. And that's because it's based on the 10-year treasury yield from the Department of Education and all of that. So you may have a bunch of loans at a bunch of different interest rates. However, and this is speaking from personal experience, if you go to one school and they're trying to make it so that way it doesn't matter, all your loans are going to be lumped with the same loan servicer, because when you borrow loans, you don't borrow from Stony Brook, you borrow from the federal government. So they partner with loan servicers who you then pay back. So while I do have 6 years of loans, they're all paid through the same source. I don't have to go online and pay 6 different loans individually. If those loans combined with your Pell Grant, combined with everything else, isn't able to cover the bill, you and your family can apply for a federal direct plus loan, which can cover up to the bill plus those non-billable charges as well. So if you're a family that really knows that you're not going to have the ability to pay anything out of pocket, including things like books and transportation, this is why that cost of attendance component is important, because your family can go out and apply for a parent plus loan to overpay the bill and help cover those non-billable charges through a refund that's sent after the loan is certified. A plus loan does have a credit check that it's run. Credit check is good for 6 months. We recommend strongly that you do a year plus loan application, usually in late June to early July, because most bills are due either mid-July to mid-August. So by then you'll know what the bill is. You'll have an understanding of what kind of financial aid you got. You'll be able to do that. And you then don't have to worry for a year. The loan will cover both fall and spring. You don't have to think about reapplying for a loan for the spring. And it is not necessarily need-based. So any family can apply for it. Just think of it about going out for a loan for something. This is a specific education loan. The loan is in the parent borrower's name. It has to be a parent forever. So there's no ability to transfer that loan to the student once they graduate whatsoever. The loan can never be transferred in that way. And it acts as an unsubsidized loan, meaning that it does accrue interest upon dispersal, but you as a parent can opt to have that interest not paid while your student's in school. You can choose to pay it, you can choose not to. Another important thing is that these loans are super flexible when it comes to repayment. So if you're in school and you have some extra cash, you can pay it early, no problem. That won't automatically trigger you to have to keep repaying it. You can stop doing that. That's kind of what I did. I kind of paid a little bit as I went. They're not going to force you to start repaying until 6 months after you've graduated or you are no longer at least half-time in the degree granting program. Some more information about loans. If you would rather explore the private loan route, they're offered through lending institutions that are not part of the federal government. I always say it's like the Wild West when it comes to this because you can look at 6 different loans and get 6 different complete answers. It's important to do your shopping when it comes to this. The best part about that is that your credit doesn't get hit every single time you shop for the same type of credit within a certain window, and it's usually 45 days. So let's say you go onto our website, and we on our website have a list of 17 lenders that we've done research on, and we and members of our office have gotten together and determined that these are the lenders that we want to promote to our students as viable options. So when you are shopping, let's say you find a Sallie Mae loan on our website, and then you got your credit run, you're like, oh, I really like the interest rate. Okay, let me go look at Discover. Doing that again will not impact your credit because it was just run by another educational loan servicer. So it won't impact your credit multiple times, which is good. I always stress that it's not the end all be all to get sold on the lowest interest rate. It's very important, but think about other benefits that you may be missing out because your interest rate is lower. Things like when repayment begins, how long repayment is that interest rate variable, meaning that it's going to change every year with how the market is doing. Variable interest rates are usually lower on paper because you're kind of assuming a lot more risk. You could end up at a higher interest rate than somebody with a fixed interest rate. Borrower incentives are really important. Lenders are starting to get into the habit of having co-signer releases. Speaking of that, a lot of times these private educational loans are going to be in the student's name with a parent co-signer or any co-signer. It doesn't have to be a parent, where the PLUS loan does. But the co-signer is the one whose credit's going to be running everything. We tend to not see students apply for loans on their own and get approved for them. But speaking about more of the incentives, sometimes loans now getting in the habit of allowing the co-signer release, where after a couple of years of loan repayment by the student, the co-signer will be completely removed from the loan and it's completely on the student how to pay that back. It's important to think about also private loans don't have the same kind of consolidation rules as federal student loans do as well. So now talking about state aid a little bit. So TAP is New York's version of that. And a lot of states do have their own versions of it. It basically is reserved for students who are that state's resident going to a school in that state. For us, it's TAP, the Tuition Assistance Program. You apply for that at HESC, which is the Higher Education Services Corporation.ny.gov. You have to do a FAFSA first, which will then link you to the TAP application. That link itself is not the application. And I stress this because a lot of times we will talk to families, especially as we get into like May, June, who are missing TAP because they thought that just linking it that way automatically does the application. That is not true. Awards can range from $500 to $5,165. In addition to that, state schools are going to also offer a SUNY tuition credit that supplements that cost as well. So between TAP and tuition credit, you can get over $6,000 similar to Pell. HESC, which is the Higher Education Services Corps, notifies you via email when the Express TAP application is available, usually a week or two after your FAFSA is done. But yeah, don't forget that just linking up and saying you want to do the Express TAP application, that's not actually doing it. That's actually, just allowing you to have access to it. There's other forms of New York State aid that are determined through HESC. There's the Excelsior Scholarship, which is I don't know if anybody remembered, it was advertised as free tuition. It covers the cost of eligible SUNY and CUNY students' tuition, where if you make less than $125,000 a year for the 2019 year, you would qualify for it. It is a last dollar award and it only covers tuition if none of the other grant funding I talked about before, so your Pell Grant, SEOG, TAP, any scholarships, if that doesn't cover tuition, then you'd qualify for Excelsior. But if any of that combination of things covers tuition, you will not be eligible for Excelsior, even though you may meet the income requirements for it. If there are questions about that, the whole team that's on the chat tonight can be able to help answer those specific kind of questions as well. There's a scholarship for academic excellence, which is awarded to outstanding graduates from registered New York State high schools. They're based on your grades on the Regents exams for up to 5 years of undergraduate study in New York State. And those amounts can be up to $1,500 a year, $750 per semester. There's also the STEM incentive program, which is for students who are graduating in the top 10% of their class in high school and are going for a STEM specific major. And you can also keep, you can get that in the same kind of regard you get TAP and all of that. There are contingencies though when it comes to both Excelsior and STEM. With Excelsior, every year you get the scholarship, you have to stay in New York for 1 year post-graduation for work. That does not include grad school. So if you're going to grad school, you don't have to worry about that. They want you to come back after grad school though. For STEM, you have to stay in New York for 5 years after graduation if you're going to do a STEM specific thing. If not, I know at least for the Excelsior scholarship, it turns into a loan on the back end. HES.ny.gov there's other like kind of quirky scholarships that are very, very isolated in terms of student eligibility. Like we have clusters of maybe 5 to 15 students who get them, but you can explore those additional things on the website, HES.ny.gov. So just to kind of tie up the rest of kind of circumstances and kind of the ending of the FAFSA process. So we understand that the prior year doing the FAFSA has made things and families kind of question, well, that was 2 years ago. And especially with what's happened over the last 2 years, wow, what I'm putting on my FAFSA is not at all indicative of what is going on in life right now. So schools have special circumstances requests. Most of the time they're called either professional judgment reviews or reevaluations, where through contact with the school, you can use more relevant financial information to allow the school to do a recalculation of your FAFSA based on your income information. Schools handle this very differently because it is a very school-specific program that's been mandated by the Department of Education. So I know I talked a lot tonight about how you can infer certain things from school to school. This is not an example of that at all. So if you are a family that has experienced a job loss since COVID and you're still kind of struggling now due to a loss of income, you would want to speak to the institution where your student ends up going to do a reevaluation. Some schools, and we are one of them, do not complete reevaluations until the summer before the year starts. So we are not a school that is able to complete them before the deposit deadline. So it's important to essentially assume that you're not going to qualify and know that that's going to be the maximum amount you're going to owe. We just don't have the ability to do it before that at this point. So you can have conversations with our staff about some hypotheticals, but in terms of actually completely redoing the FAFSA before deposit day, where we are not a school that's going to be able to do that. But you should definitely speak to the schools, especially as it gets closer to January and February, and even, well, we'll say March, when your students starting to at least eliminate some schools, to start talking to the few that are left about this process and see what you can do to at least get the ball rolling as best possible. Because, like I said, I absolutely, and somebody in financial aid who would help try to give some scenario-based answers or some hypothetical-based answers, but I wouldn't be able to put anything in concrete for you regarding that. So that's just a little bit about special circumstances. And it doesn't have to be a loss of income. I talked about divorce before. If there's other circumstances that you think would qualify you for that, it's just a conversation with your financial aid office at the school that you or your child ends up going to. So that was a quick crash course. This is some important information regarding our contact information. You see the admissions information on top. Enroll at stonybrook.edu, financial aid, that's us, FinAid at stonybrook.edu. The websites that I mentioned a lot tonight are below, FAFSA.ed.gov, HESC.ny.gov, and then StudentAid.gov. And of course, stonybrook.edu. I know it says any questions, but I have seen the Q&A kind of continuing to pop up with some stuff. So it looks like you all are asking some questions already. But that is kind of the ending of this quick crash course into the spooky FAFSA and spooky financial aid. I hope you feel a little bit better about this process now that you got this information.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was Awesome. We do have some questions that I think would be great for the audience to hear. But first off, before we do anything, for students that are freshmen applicants who are in high school right now, or parents of students who are seniors, what do you think is the number one thing they should be doing at the moment in regards to financial aid?
Doing the FAFSA. Just doing the FAFSA. Oh, I want to, so a couple things I didn't mention. FAFSA, you can put 10 schools on. So you can, if I know that I was a student who applied to 12, so sometimes you apply to more schools than the 10. You submit your 10, try to pick your top ones. And then once the school notifies you that they have your FAFSA, you can take that school off and add another one. TAP only has one school option. So if you can change it later on, but it's going to probably link, and I think this is true, it links with the number one school on your FAFSA. So just be mindful of that when you do that. But you absolutely should be doing the FAFSA now, because just this is the time of year where things get kind of fast when it comes to, you know, the holidays around and all that, and you don't want to kind of lose sight of it. And then all of a sudden it's January and your students starting to get into school, but you're missing financial aid, so you don't have a complete understanding of what that means in terms of what it's going to cost. So definitely doing your FAFSA right now.
Okay. And so there were a couple questions. I know you hit upon this, but just to reiterate, can you just explain the CSS profile and whether or not Stony Brook requires it?
We don't require it, no. So CSS is generally reserved for schools that are going to be able to offer need-based financial aid grants. So not like they're in like a weird category. Like it's not necessarily a scholarship, it's more like a need-based scholarship. So we are not a school that accepts that, because we don't have the ability to use it in any sort of way that would help our students. So we do not accept it. Any sort of special circumstances would be handled through that reevaluation process.
Okay. And do students need to reapply for financial aid every year?
Yes, so that's the FAFSA every year, the TAP application every year. Excelsior, you only have to do once your freshman year, and then the Excelsior application on HESC's website will automatically link with TAP when you do it your sophomore, junior, and senior year. All loan applications are yearly loans. You can't apply for a plus loan for more than 1 year at a time. Sometimes private loans will do like a weird line of credit for 4 years, but don't get wrapped up in that. Just assume yearly for everything.
And same thing goes for scholarships. Is that awarded annually or is that re-upped every year?
So they're awarded if you get a merit-based scholarship, almost always that's going to be for 4 years. So you don't have to apply for anything. For university-specific scholarships, like our donor ones, if you get it, it'll either be a 1-year award or a multi-year award with a review process within a couple of years, depending on what the nature of that scholarship really entails.
And we had questions about the financial aid award and just the kind of timeline of things. So I do want to mention that everything that we do is pretty digital in this day and age. We do get around 40,000 applications for admission at a freshman level for undergraduate studies at Stony Brook every single year. Many of those students do apply for financial aid and do apply for obviously admission. So a lot of what we do is digital. Make sure that whatever email address you are using for your undergraduate admissions application and likely your FAFSA with your FSA ID are emails that you check on a regular and consistent basis. Don't use a school email, especially if that's an email that's going to close out after you graduate in June, when we will continue to email you on a regular basis throughout next summer. So I do recommend a private email address, one that you check really consistently. But in regards to financial aid award letter, when does that typically come out and how does it get shared with students?
So to echo what you said, we are very digital. So you're not going to be getting any sort of thing in the mail. It is a digital notification. It's called the SUNY Smart Track Letter. And late March is what has been historic. We do our best to try to beat that every year. But I would say March is the best time. We really try to get you out with information at least 6 weeks before you have to deposit. And that's also going to be reliant on having FAFSA completed and everything. It takes about 2 weeks for a FAFSA to fully make its way through our system to be offered this kind of stuff. So don't wait until like March 1st to do it, because then your smart track letter will be delayed. TAP can take a month. So make sure, that's why I stress doing these things before it gets, colder and busier, just do them sooner. But March is where we kind of keep landing when it comes to that.
Okay. Let's see what we have here. Now, we had a question about applying to the college first and then applying for FAFSA. Typically, it happens kind of around the same time, I would say, right?
I would say, I guess that kind of depends on how you're applying, right? So if you're applying like ED or EA, I know sometimes you'd want to do those earlier. You don't have to do one before the other, but it does kind of happen in the same cluster of like that 4 to 8 week period where you're doing, 17 college essays and then the FAFSA and all that.
Yeah. And when Josh mentions ED or EA, what we're talking about is early decision or early action. Now, it's important to note Stony Brook in particular is not an early action or early decision school. We only have one deadline for all students. We are a regular decision school with January 15th as our admissions priority deadline. So you can apply to us early action or early decision, but many other schools do. So if you apply to those schools or Stony Brook ahead of submitting your financial aid, that's absolutely fine. And if you do submit your financial aid first, then you can always submit an admissions application, but it's important to do both. Applying for financial aid does not mean you're applying to the university.
And just to stress one more thing about that, we're not going to offer financial aid package to students who aren't admitted. So if you do send us an application, we're not going to fully process it until we know that you're admitted.
That brings up a good point, actually. So we are going to, so for any of you who are seniors this year, who are interested in transferring to Stony Brook in the future, any of you counselors that are here with us tonight, again, we thank you all for joining us. But I will say that we are going to host more financial aid events, at least one in the spring on a kind of different part of the process. We're talking about applying now. We'll be talking about really what it means to see your financial aid package and the timeline of things in a very different sense come the spring. So for those of you who do get admitted to Stony Brook, you will be invited to participate in that, which will just be a bit more of a different information timeline. We got a couple questions about 529 accounts. Do you have anything that you'd want to share in a kind of more general sense about those?
Yeah, so that's handled. So schools are very unique in how they have their enrollment management offices. So Student Financial Services is not us. So that's the Bursar's office. And they, on their website, they actually publish about where to send 529 checks. It's through a PO box and all of that. They say that it's about a 3-week time, expect like a 3-week window. So you want to cut the check at least 3 weeks before the bill is due for that. In terms of like it impacting financial aid, it does have to be reported on the FAFSA. But that's kind of really all I would kind of know at this point from a general standpoint.
Okay, and just to reiterate, because there were a couple of questions on the next academic year, which is the 2022-2023 year, and FAFSA that correlates to it, which year of taxes are they using? 2020,
everybody's favorite year.
2020.
Yeah.
It'll go down in history, everybody, 2020.
It will, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why I kind of stressed that last slide about special circumstances, because we understand, and the DOE and everybody understands that the world was kind of weird in 2020. So there's ways to accommodate that.
There was a question about fee waivers, and as the admissions person here, I will answer that. Unfortunately, for fee waivers to apply to the university, we are not at liberty to give fee waivers to students. If you're applying for Common App, there is a Common App fee application waiver where you would need information from your school counselor, guidance counselor, college counselor, whoever's in your high school that's going to be assisting you. There are certain documents that you could submit for a fee waiver. Same thing goes with SUNY. They have their own fee waiver. So whichever application you are utilizing, please note that you will have to request a fee waiver through those sources, as we don't give out fee waivers here in the admissions office. So it has nothing to do with financial aid. You don't have to submit anything to us. Unfortunately, we just can't issue fee waivers out to you. If students forgot their key code, is there a way of figuring out what that is, or even with their FSA ID?
So you'd have to go to that studentaid.gov website. And I think that there's a way to kind of reset your stuff. I'm not too familiar with kind of the technical side of that. You sometimes have to call them. I know there's like a bunch of checkpoints in place if you forgot your password and all of that. You don't lose it forever. It's not like if you don't remember it, you can't do a FAFSA. It's just sometimes it can be a little bit exhaustive because they make you wait sometimes to actually reset it and all of that. So just make sure you're writing things down somewhere. I'm the worst with that too. I I literally forget my passwords all the time for everything. But just try to make sure you're writing things down, or try to do it in one shot. So some people think that this FAFSA is going to take them hours and hours. It's really not. Even as a brand new doer of it, if you take an hour and you dedicate it, you'll be done. You will.
And for students who have, or not really, for parents who have multiple children in their families who might be, their second child might be entering college now, they've already submitted a FAFSA or an FSAID ahead of time for another child, or in the future, do they have to make multiple FSAIDs? Do they have to apply for financial aid multiple times?
They have to, so apply, yes, because it's a different FAFSA for the different student, but they would have the same FSAID.
Awesome. So only
Because
one
that links with like your social, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's makes things a little easier. Things were very different when I was in school, that's for sure. Oh, we got a cute question. Why should you not be afraid of the FAFSA? You kind of just answered that, but I like it.
I will say, I kind of spite my dad with this. He's somebody who actually did pay somebody to do the FAFSA, and then I end up in financial aid. So, but it's nuts. It's these things are scary. I think doing any sort of college in general, this whole process is this great combination of fear and excitement at the same time, and you kind of got to live through the motions of that. It's just another step in the process that's kind of maybe not exactly the prettiest one, but it helps you afford school. Doing this is a gateway for you to be able to take the next big step in your life. So it's kind of a good thing.
Let's see. A lot of questions are about just contacting us. I did put in the chat all of our contact information. It's up on the screen for you. So both myself and my colleagues in admissions, Josh and all of his colleagues who have been awesome in the Q&A answering all of your questions, thank you guys so much, are all here to assist you through any of this. If there are questions that you did not get answered tonight, questions you didn't even think of, questions that pop up 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, a year from now, whatever it may be, we're here for you. Don't let us be the scary ones to frighten you off of getting your questions answered. So just reach out to us. That's as simple as it is. We're here for you to answer those types of questions. Let's see. Questions about transferring and just the process for transfer students with financial aid.
So if you're transferring between years, that's usually not a big issue. But if you're doing a fall to spring new school, you're going to want to make sure that you add our school code to your current FAFSA. So you're going to want to log on to the 2021 to 2022 FAFSA, because you have the option to do both. And I think it automatically defaults to the upcoming year instead of this current year. Add our school code and then submit the corrections. We'll get your FAFSA then. For TAP, you're going to want to change your school code on TAP as well through the HESC website as well. Our school codes, I'll say it's slow in case people want it. It's 002838 for the FAFSA. So that's 002838. And for TAP, it's 0875.
Awesome. All right. There was a couple of mentions in the Q&A about getting these slides. And while the actual slides will not be shared with you, we are recording tonight's session, and we will be having hosting it on our Stony Brook University admissions YouTube page. The link is in the chat. So click on the little chat button at the bottom of your Zoom, open that up, and you'll have a whole bunch of emails, links, including our YouTube address. Financial Aid also has their own YouTube, so you will be able to see not only this video, but also many other phenomenal videos that they have put together to share with you all. So just Google SBU admission or SBU Financial Aid YouTube. You'll be taken to their YouTube page as well. But they're a wonderful financial resource. They do so much for our students. So again, thank you, Josh, for presenting tonight. It looks like we've got most of our questions answered. There are a couple of questions that are getting answered right now. But thank you everyone for joining us on a Thursday night right before Halloween. It has been awesome hanging out with you. Josh, any other tidbits to share with the group?
No, enjoy this process, and especially the parents who are first-time parents of students. It's scary and it's fun and exciting, and I think I was on the student side, obviously, and it's, try to take a step back and realize that this is a really fun kind of part of life. So just enjoy that, and reach out to financial aid offices. Call us because we're here to help you.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.